everybody, and welcome. We're so excited to have our fifth, where's Bill? Yeah, fifth. Last week, yeah. Our fifth speaker, who's going to be telling us her faith journey and story. And this is an unusual person at St. David's because she's actually was a founding member when she was 6 years old. So she is, yes, give her some. She's the oldest living St. David's, I think. Not the oldest in age, but been around the longest. So 19, oh, Marty, you were? There you go. Good for Marty. So Launa parents, when she first, or in the Twin Cities, she's a lifelong Episcopalian, and you started out at Saint, what was it that you started out at again? The All Saints?
All Saints.
All Saints. And then when the St. David's mission started, they lived just down the road, so this was a natural place for them to come. And Launa's been in every corner of this building for 70 years, and 75 years maybe.
Let's not go there.
Yeah, okay, we won't go to age. But one of the things she's really known for is she's one of our garden gnomes. So the Peace Garden out there is literally a monument to your parents and to the hard work and the beauty that you brought to St. David's. So we're so excited to hear from Launa Tucker. Be ready with questions at the end too.
So I was blessed with waking up Friday morning with a cold. Oh, okay. So I was blessed with a bad cold Friday morning. Saturday I went and had it checked to make sure it wasn't COVID because I didn't want to spread it around.
Good for you.
So my voice is probably 2 octaves lower than usual, but that's the way it goes. So,
You can join the tenors.
okay. So, from John, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, as a man sent, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came for testimony to bear witness to the light, that all might believe through him. He was not the light, but came to bear witness to the light. And when questioned about who he was by the priests and Levites, he said, I am the voice of one crying in the wilderness. Make straight the way of the Lord, as the prophet Isaiah said. I love John. So you have to listen. So as Nan said, I am a cradle Episcopalian. I was baptized in All Saints Church in Minneapolis, and I actually have my certificate of attendance in the nursery from there. And that's where my journey in faith started. And St. David's came together in 1952 with the donation of land by George and Louise Burwell. My parents were a part of that beginning because my dad had recently finished building our house, which is just on the other side of these St. David's Road, on Inverness Road, if you know the area. So it was close. Why should we drive all the way into Minneapolis? So convenience rules. But the downside of having St. David's built here in this spot for all of the neighborhood kids was they cut down the best climbing trees and removed all the sumac bushes that we had been using as our little houses But, we had to learn to live with it. And what this all means is that I have been here for a really long time. And I won't say how long, you'll have to do your own math. And it's been a long road, which has been twisted and lots of turns filled with differing life events. And so what I've sort of done is picked a few things that have been important in my life and in which St. David's has contributed. Way too many things to say them all, so I just picked mine. And that's where John comes in, because I started it because I love the poetry of John, or whoever John is. And I also feel like John, sometimes with that crying in the wilderness, not knowing what's behind those trees. And I frequently found myself asking and pleading with God to make things all right, to make my life more smooth, to get rid of the boulders in my road. But she just keeps answering me with, you can get through this. I'm right behind you. And I do believe in miracles, but I also believe that, I've come to believe that sometimes God sends us pillows to cushion our fall. Some people may call these coincidences, but I have, in thinking about coming here and doing this morning, I decided I like to call them pillows. We're still going to fall, but God is going to be there. He's not going to change what happened, but He's going to cushion our fall so that it might not be as painful. So there was one summer when my mom has 4 sisters and 1 brother, and by twist of fate, they were all here in Minnesota. 2 live out of state. So they're all here in Minnesota, so we had a picnic in our backyard, and because my mom's brother was a priest, and we had a new baby, I don't know which cousin it was, because that was too long ago. So the adults decided that this baby needed to be baptized since all the family was there. So we trooped over to St. David's. The door was always open then. And my uncle in his knee-high socks, shorts, Hawaiian shirt, and he might have had his orange blaze cap on too. He was not a fashion icon. He was comfortable. And that's what the church is, and St. David's is for me. It's a comfortable place. It's a place that I feel accepted. And I think it really started with that moment of walking over. It wasn't a formal baptism, it's just that the church is always open. And I've kept that with me for all these years. Too many years. In grade school, after the building was completed, I had a Sunday school teacher, and I forget if it was 3rd or 4th grade, something like that. Her name was Hilda Martin, and she was talking to us about entering the church, because we're chatterboxes, we're children, we don't know. And she wanted us to know a reverent way to enter church. And she's taught us a prayer. And this is the prayer that she taught us. Take from me, O Lord, anything that has no place in thy worship, and make me glad to be at home with thee. Amen. It just says it all for me, and I still use it when I enter that place. Simple, easy, short, easy to remember, perfect for, little kids. And then I came to high school. It was time for confirmation. Oh my. We had to sit down here in the undercrop with Mrs. Marsh on a Saturday morning and memorize. It was horrible. We had no desire to be here on a Saturday morning when you're 14 or 15. There are other things that were more important. But we did it. And then the big night with Bishop Kellogg came. We've been warned that he might quiz us on some of our confirmation prayers or vows or beliefs or anything. And we were, well, I'll speak for myself, a little nervous because I assume if you ask me something, it's going to be something that I'll have forgotten. And then I'll, and when you're that age, you don't want to be embarrassed. So it was stressful. Then the time, and he, as it turned out, he did not question us. But he had a way, when it came time for laying on of the hands, when he put his hands on your head and give you the Holy Spirit, you knew that he did. Because his hands pushed you down to the point where you felt like you had to arch your neck to keep it up. But I assume it's because he wanted to make sure that it all took for these young people. And just as another aside, we have all around here, all the pictures. Each poster has 10 years of St. David's life. And thanks to Bill, he fixed this one poster, and you can all see my confirmation class, the girls in our confirmation class. We were in white dresses and had little white veils. And that was just the way it was. We didn't have a choice. We didn't question it because that's what we did. So you can go peek and maybe you can find me, I don't know. Time has. But that's more of the faith that I have. And that was more of setting it into my brain and making it something that is comfortable and welcoming for me. We had one of our youth group meetings. We were talking about the creation story. And there was one person there. Her name was Ellen Lowry. Why I remember her name, I have no idea. Because I sometimes can't remember where I parked my car. But to pull this out, I don't know. She said that for her, Creation Day was every day. She woke up in the morning and it was new. And I'm going, huh? She's thinking too much. But it sat in the back of my mind, and I realized that, yes, that is new possibilities. And why not? God gives us each day to start fresh, to begin again. And I which was fine because he didn't follow most of them anyway. I should tell, there was one time he and his friends, they were supposed to be in church. This was in high school, and they went up into the attic above the church and were walking, and one of his friends stepped through the ceiling. Yeah, it wasn't, he said it wasn't pretty after that. And so that was his take on his Baptist church. But so when he came here, we got married, and he would come to church periodically. He worked at night at the Star Tribune, and so Saturday night was their big production night. He worked in the production end. So no one had Saturday night off, because back then, their Sunday paper was about this thick. And now, of course, you know it's not. But there was a time, that was at a time when he was thinking about being received into the Episcopal Church. And he was sort of hemming and hawing about it, and then I was sort of telling him, no, just do it, just call. Ron Bauer was the priest at the time. And I told Ron of my frustration, and he looked me like straight in the eye, and he said, stay out of it. I went, what? He said, yeah, this isn't your choice. What a letdown. But another lesson in faith. You can't make someone do what you want them to do. It has to come from them. And it did, and he was received, and I was grateful. There are other occasions, not all happy, but my dad died in 1983. He was 62 years old. He had a massive heart attack. But there were a number of odd things which surrounded that event. The first one that was odd is that I went to the house before they left for their vacation to see my brother lived in El Paso at that time. So I went to the house and I said goodbye and hugged and you know what you would do, but I did not usually do that. Usually it's a phone call the night before and I'd say have a good trip, say hi, etc. Well, then they drove and they made 2 stops on the way. The first stop was in Casper, Wyoming, where my mother's cousin lived. They were the same age. They had sort of grown up together. They'd gone to Girl Scout camp together, so they were friends. So they stopped and saw Dorothy, and then proceeded south, and I think they stopped again somewhere near, either in Denver or near. My dad was in the 8th Air Corps during World War II, and he was a radio operator on a B-24 bomber. It was shot down over Germany, and the pilot bailed out, and my dad said, no, I'm not jumping out over Germany. So he was able to take control of the plane. He had some pilot training. And then he was able to glide the plane into Sweden. So he spent, I forget how long, because he never really talked about it, but he spent time in Sweden and could not leave. And so I have a book that he put together, which is very interesting. But anyway, so he was able to talk to the pilot. They kept in touch over the years, just Christmas cards. So he's able to talk to this pilot. And then they got to El Paso. My brother had just had a new baby, so he was there to hold Mark as an infant. And then he was at the community pool swimming with my older brother, and that's when he died. He had a heart attack at the pool, but my brother was with him. And then more curious things. My mom brought her phone book with her. Who brings a phone book on vacation? Apparently this time my mom did. And at the time, my sister was traveling Europe and England, and my mom had one phone number for her, only one. My mom called it, and the woman answered the phone and said, wow, you're really lucky, because she was leaving for a trip to Southeast Asia or something. And she had forgotten something. So she came back in the house. And that was when my mom called her. Go figure. So then she gave her a number. She said, I don't know if Lee and Mike, or her husband, are at this house in London, but this is the only number I have. So they were staying in a cottage, and then they, for whatever reason, my mom called that phone number, and she was in that house at the time. And that's where, for me, those pillows came to cushion the fall, to make that death more, I don't want to say palatable, but to ease some of the tension and the stress. He died away from home, but he had his family with him, and we were able to celebrate his life together. Then, as part of the 50th anniversary of the St. David's, Nan talked about the garden. Ellen Brittle one of our parishioners had a little bobcat. I had dirt dumped, and he came and he smoothed it all out, made it nice. I'm sitting on the hill watching him, and he finishes and he says, Launa, your palate awaits. And I sat there and I was thinking, oh, what have I done? It's a lot of dirt. But it happened. People came forward. And for me, another pillow helped to cushion that fall from St. David's, to let me know that there was a community supporting me and some of my dreams. So then a few years later, we had a family from St. David's that had a child that had died at birth. And so they donated some money for a kind of a children's section in the garden. And so I talked with them, spoke with them about what we were going to put there. And so I ordered some boulders, commemorative boulders, if you will. And I had a friend of my son's who did engraving. I asked him if he would engrave these boulders. I envisioned, little angels and, the typical baby kinds of designs. On his computer, he only had one that was appropriate for as a commemoration for an infant. That was a lamb. It was very sweet. So I had him engrave one of them with this lovely lamb. then I called my sister, who was living in Vancouver, and she's an artist, so I asked her to draw an angel. So she did. She drew a kneeling angel, and so I gave that to our engraver, and he engraved that on the second stone. The third stone, the family didn't know what they wanted, just whatever I wanted, which puts you in a hard place. So what I did is I had just an empty cross engraved, and then I had him engrave, Jesus loves me. When they saw it, they said that was the song that they sang to the baby when he was still in the womb. And they sang it repeatedly. And I'm going, how do I know these things? Where is it coming from? So, a pillow from God, maybe. So, another, in 1984, the real women got together. And we sort of took it from the current slogan, real men eat quiche. So we said, well, real women can camp alone. Sorry, we don't need men to help us, we can do this. So that's what we did. And it was a wonderful community for laughing and sharing the ups and downs of our lives. We've only had 2 minor injuries in all these years. One finger jammed on a very rocky portage, and one a sprained wrist from a fall, which I won't, well, I'll tell you how she fell. She doesn't go here anymore, she lives in Indiana. And Susan remembers. Yeah. In the Boundary Waters, you don't have flush toilets, obviously. So they're all outdoors. So she went to use the government box, and there was a small sapling there, and they build them up for obvious reasons. So it's kind of on a hilly spot with this one sapling, and she kind of loses her balance, grabs the sapling, which is, 2 inches, and falls over and cracks her wrist. So she got to duff, which meant she didn't have to paddle the rest of the trip. So we teased her about that. We always celebrated communion in the woods, and in the later years, Virginia Haggart made a little cross from a couple of sticks and some twine. And the cup that we used typically was my stainless steel cocoa mug, because that's what we had. And the bread or the wafers were placed in a small Tupperware container. And I have pictures of the different places that we've had communion, and the different plates and cups and altars that we've used. And it makes me know that, and further concludes that God is everywhere. He is where you are, and that's where I felt him. And this is the prayer that we say after communion. Finally, we thank you, O God, for the beauty of the wilderness and the friendships that have been created and nourished under this northern sky. Watch over all of us, we pray. Lynn Pearson, Barb Heiss, Rochelle Prey, Carol Johnson, Catherine Zervis, Jan Strand, Diane Paulson, Jerry Henderson, Laura Rites, Marty Scott, Leslie Foskett, Nora Caldwell, Chrissy Bain, a preacher now, Karen Madsen, Susan Taylor, Heather Craig, Virginia Hager, Pam Taylor, Kay Richardson, Lana Tucker, Peg Wilner, Ellie Voisin Tom, Sue Kemp, Eleanor Taylor, Kay Turner, Marcia Lutz, Bonnie Plucker, Catherine Lewis, Diane Curley, Maddie Harvala, Ann Fuller, Hulda Niles, Emily Johnson, Shirley Roots. And we pray especially for our friends, Marilyn Buell, Anna Lano, Harriet Frazier, Kathy Thiessen, Mary Lou Triebenbach, Susan Caldwell, and Pat Anderson. May they be at peace. Amen. So we don't forget. We know these people. We shared communion and getting stuck on sandbars and trying something new like, oh, we can get from point A to point B. Oh, let's just take this turn. Well, we sort of walked. But it was a wonderful group, and I am very grateful for all the women who have participated in that. Now, in the Peace Garden, we have a Celtic Cross, and it was donated by a parishioner. Her name was Dee Hodge, and she was a faithful 8 o'clocker. And so it was engraved with, she had 2 twin daughters. They were, so she had their names engraved on it. And then I spoke to her on the phone a number of times about this. And I told her to decide what else she would like on the cross, because there was, to have another engraving. And she sort of hemmed and hawed and said, well, hesitantly, could peace be all right? I said, oh, yes, it's perfect. And so that's what we had. And so it was engraved, and we had it done in a company in Texas. And so I received a picture of it before it was shipped, and to make sure that it was correct. So I made arrangements to have it installed and that sort of thing. And then before the cross arrived, tragically, Dee died unexpectedly. So my pillow for that disaster for me was that she had seen the picture. She knew what it was. So again, God's pillows come, and I'm trying to keep aware of those to make some of the pain lessen. So the greatest, this is the emotional piece, the greatest and worst event in my life was the death of my husband. He died on Valentine's Day in 2016. He had congested heart failure. Preceding that, which is we did some things. He wanted to take 2 of our grandkids out to Whidbey Island, which where our youngest son lived. So, and he loved the train. So we took the train out, took the 2 kids, and then our daughter had to go. It's a free vacation. So we got to go, and my son has 2 daughters, so the 4 of the kids got to be together. And they got to, my son has 5 acres of property. And so they have horses, and alpacas, a mini donkey, chickens, barn cats, a dog, oh, 2 alpacas. So they got to be at the farm. And my husband just smiled the whole time he was there. And it was obvious to me that he was losing his energy, and but he was happy. What more could you ask? So then we did that in August. Then come October of 2015, we had a phone call. He had a friend in Pensacola, his best friend, and they would talk, once or twice a year. It was not a lot. But he called a couple months before and left a message on David's phone. Well, his best friend David, his brother-in-law called us and said that David had taken ill. He had kidney cancer, and he was in a coma. And so we tried to decide what we should do, because we knew we had to be there because he was an important person. He was his best friend. So as we're talking the next day, when to go, should we go now, should we wait? And we got another phone call from his brother-in-law. He's awake. So we left the next morning to go home. So we had a chance to talk with David. He was obviously still in the hospital, but they got to talk and reminisce, because that's what they did, about all the things that they did, and the scrapping fights that they got into, and all those fun and games. They used to go to a pond near their house. Before they jump into it, they would throw rocks into the water. That would chase the snakes away. So that's Turner's Mill Pond. So that's the kind of place that he grew up in. He had adventures, and so when he got out of high school, he joined the Army as a paratrooper. Also because they paid like $5 more. That was priorities. It's what, Anyway, we were able to see David and go back to where he lived. We saw his old house. We went to the cemetery where his family was buried. And I'm going, oh, it's changed. Well, it's grown. It's older than, I said, but the gravestones were by a tree. Kept looking for this tree. Well, the tree was cut down. So it was a little, only by chance did we walk by and see it. But we did. And so that's, for us, that was another pillow, looking back. And then when we came back, his friend died a couple weeks after we left. And so he ended up, I was taking him to the hospital. He was having chest pains. There was nothing more that they could do to correct what had gone wrong in his heart and the arteries leading up to him. He had enough of stents put in and valve replacements and all that. So he went home in November for hospice care. And oh my gosh, that's when St. David's kicked into gear. We had, food was brought over. I remember Diane's brownies. And Martha and Steve Johnson brought communion. And then there was a time, part of this dying process was he would sleep for extended lengths of time. There was one time that it was really, I thought was too long, but I didn't want him to die, so whatever is too long. I really, really, really got mad at God because I said, as I'm shaking my fist, and I said, what more do you want? What more can he give? Why won't you let him go? I sent that in an email to Catherine. I was obviously emotional. And she sent back a reply that was filled with compassion. And I appreciated it. It was kind of pulling me down back to earth. And I think he woke up in a couple of, maybe an hour or so later. But in the meantime, I'd gotten out my prayer book. And because it was like 2 or 3 in the morning, I got out my prayer book and I gave him the last rites. You know, when 2 or more are gathered, and I'm going, okay, there's 2 of us. He's sleeping, but you know, he's still here. So I gave him his last rites, and then it was interesting in that after he died, and Catherine came over, and she gave him the last rites with the holy oil, and she also had my grandchildren that had come. This was late in the evening on Valentine's Day, and she had them make the sign of the cross and the oil on his forehead. He was very close with these 2 particular grandkids. We did a lot of daycare and had them around a lot, and they were very close to him. He gave them whatever they wanted. They'd go to Cub at midnight and get the day-old donut box. And my granddaughter would always get one of those Beanie Babies. She'd pick one out. My grandson would get a Hot Wheels with whatever they wanted. Sure, put it in the basket. The other thing with his death, we had talked about, before he went into hospice, we had talked about death and how we wanted to be. And one of the things that we sort of disagreed on was, I said, well, when you die, I'm going to be there because I want to be there. That's important. And he said, no. And I was like, what? He said, no, this is a private moment between me and God, and you're not allowed. And I'm going, well, but life went on. And then on Valentine's Day, we had the kids, our grandkids over, so it was a lot of chaos, and he was in his hospital bed in the living room. And just having a good time, having everybody over. And then they left. Chaos went with them. And it was quiet and calm. And then came the moment I'm sitting in my chair, reading, and I look up, and I realize that he was gone. It's like, then I thought, and I said, okay, we both got what we wanted. I was able to be in the room, and he was alone with God, because he was on the other side, and it was quiet, and I was sitting in another place. I wasn't hovering over. And that was, for me, was the best pillow that God has ever sent to me. And then another wonderful event this last week. My oldest grandson and his wife came for a visit. They stayed with me. And they gave me the news that they were having a baby in September. And I'm going, wow, Grandpa would be happy. He loved grandchildren. I'm going, okay. And that was okay. And I thanked God. And I felt comfort and just a little bit of pain because he wasn't there. But there was a baby. A new life is always a blessing. And I'm going to end, because that's enough talking, with a quote from my great-grandfather. This was the end of an article he wrote for the Red Wing Herald or whatever it was in 1939. He was talking about the house that he and the family had lived in. He said, the joys and sorrows of life, its difficulties and its perplexities and its rewards have come to me and mine within these walls. And whatever the future may have for us, we know that our kind Heavenly Father doeth all things well. That's
Thank you, Launa. Speaking from the heart like that, oh my goodness, wonderful. We only have just a couple minutes left, so if anybody has one thing you want to say to Launa, she can sit and breathe now for a bit. Any thoughts or comments? And yeah, Jermaine, I'm going to give you the mic.
I'll speak up. Oh, no, you can't.
Thank you, Launa. I thought that was I really enjoyed your presentation. I have a question about all the women's names that you mentioned when you were talking about the real women. Yes. Were they all women who had at one time or other participated in your real? Oh, they were.
Yes. Yeah. These
wow.
Are all...
So, how big a crowd was there sometimes when you went?
Well, the first time there were 14.
This was over
many years.
This is over since 1983. These
oh
were all
gosh.
the women who participated.
Wow, you really are real women.
Yes, we are. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for all of this. I know it was hard for you, and I appreciate it, and the stories, and especially the ones about the real women too.